you can curate news using that discover sources feature. So I can put in a prompt, please give me the most current AI news for the week of, or for the last week, or for the last 2 weeks. And it will then go out to the internet and do the search. And then you can pull that into your knowledge base and start talking on that.
Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Lisa Monks. If you don't know who Lisa is, she is a social media and AI strategist. She's the founder of Chipmunk Media, a consultancy designed to help brick and mortar businesses use social media and AI to reach their target audience. Lisa, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good morning, Mike. I'm awesome. How are you? It's a lovely Friday. Well, it's a wet Friday here.
It's super awesome to have you all the way from down under. Today, Lisa and I are going to explore how to use Google's NotebookLM to unlock all sorts of fascinating insights. If you don't know what NotebookLM is, don't worry. You're going to know pretty soon. It's an amazing AI tool that everybody's going to love. But before we even get into that, I want to hear your story, Lisa. How'd you get into AI? Start wherever you want to start.
Okay, so I'm just going to go back to where I started in the whole digital, social media space. I come from the early days of social media, kind of like an OG in that space. But prior to that, I was working as an international marketing manager for a local tourism organisation here in Australia, in North Queensland. And whilst I was doing that, I was travelling the world, selling our destination. And that was at the time when social media was just coming onto the scene. And I fell in love with Twitter. And I loved how it connected you internationally to your audience. So that was my first touch on the digital side of things and how you could connect technology to meeting people and developing relationships. Fast forward to 2011, I left my job at Tourism Tropical North Queensland and I started my own company, and that was Chipmunk Media. And that was predominantly to help businesses, predominantly brick and mortar businesses in Australia and New Zealand, help them connect with their audience using technology, using social media. And then flip forward to AI coming onto the scene. Now, it was pre-ChatGPT. I was actually using conversion AI, which then changed to Jarvis, which then changed to Jasper. So I was using that probably for about a year and a half prior to ChatGPT launching onto the scene. And then, of course, there was that day, 30th of November, 2022, when ChatGPT hit the scene, and I sat there and I was watching what people were saying on Twitter, and I experimented. And a few days later, I was on one of my weekly morning radio sessions. I did a weekly Tech Tuesday segment with our local radio here, where we covered everything digital, scams, digital tools, etc. And I said to them, "Oh my God, people, I'm going to blow your mind. AI. We're going to talk about AI today." And they would go, "Okay, what's this AI thing that you're talking about?" And nobody had heard about it it hadn't hit the news here in Australia at that point. So I said, look, it's called ChatGPT, and it is an incredible tool. It's like an interactive chatbot. And of course, none of us really knew the extent of what it was and where it is now, what it was going to eventuate to be. But I said, it's an incredible tool where you can have an interactive conversation with it. It's basically, you put in a question, it spits it out. And so they go like, "What do you mean?" So I said, let's give it an on-air live go. And so we did a live demonstration on air, and their minds were blown. And they said to me, "Lisa, are you just geeking out? Is this something that we need to, really take note of? Or if we stick our heads in the sand, what's going to happen?" And at that point, as I said, it was about probably a week after ChatGPT had launched. I said, "Look, this technology is going to change the world forever. It is going to change the way we communicate with people personally and business. It is going to change business life. People will lose their jobs over this going into the future," although I never expected how fast this whole technology was going to evolve. But I did say at that point, everything, it's been a game changer. One, because it is free. I think that was the biggest unlock for everybody, because ChatGPT was free. I was using Jasper, and that was at the time, it was a very expensive tool. It was in our Australian dollars, it was nearly $200 a month at that point. So to have a tool that was free, accessible to everyone, I immediately, light bulbs went off. I thought, this is incredible. I need to explore this more. And basically, I've been going down the rabbit hole ever since. And the thing is, the technology has exploded so fast, and it's a real struggle to keep up with it all. It seriously is a real struggle to keep up with it all. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners out there feeling exactly the same. And so I started looking for ways to try and, retain that information somewhere where I could put that information, that I could refer to it as a later date as things started evolving, as new tools came out. Hence, NotebookLM came onto the scene, and that is what I am using. And that's basically what I'm going to talk to you about today, is how this is one of the most underrated AI tools out there, I believe. NotebookLM has incredible power. It is a research note-taking tool developed by Google, and it is in a secure environment. So it's a fantastic tool where you can just curate all your knowledge in one area and then start using it.
I love it. I love it. You and I were both in San Diego at Social Media Marketing World, and then later at a Mari Smith event that she had going on. And
Yes.
the buzz was about AI changing the world of marketing and entrepreneurship, and all that stuff was palpable. Like, everybody was talking about it. And
Yes.
it's kind of crazy as I'm reflecting on your story, because I was also very early on the ChatGPT bandwagon, and I saw where it was going, and I didn't even plan to do anything with it. Like, this podcast which is now a year into its journey, I wasn't planning to do any of this. I wanted to wait to see whether or not there would be a certain series of things that would happen before I was going to decide that I'm going to pursue this. And it's just so fascinating, the opportunities that are there for people that are willing to experiment with this thing. And yet it's also a learning curve. And that's why I'm excited to talk to you specifically about NotebookLM. So we're going to get into it deep today, folks. But before we go there, for marketers or creatively minded people or entrepreneurs that are listening right now, why should they focus on NotebookLM when there are so many other tools that are out there? Like, what is the big benefit, if you will, for them to pay attention?
Well, I think one of the most important benefits is that it's in their Google ecosystem, so it's a lot more secure than some of the other platforms that are used. It is accurate source-based responses, because you upload your documents into NotebookLM, and it's utilizing the retrieval augmented generation system, the RAG system, where it references factual material that's actually in your notebook. So it lessens the ability for the AI to hallucinate.
Yeah.
Yes. So, and I think that's a big one, because I have used documents inside of NotebookLM, and I've used the same documents outside where they tend to leak in, and other information is brought in, and it is just black and there's no comparison really, because at least I know when I'm in Notebook, it is reading the documents that I have put in there. It is reading the factual information, and that's the only information it is reading, unless, of course, you go out and ask it to pull in information from the website, which is obviously one of their new features of Notebook, which is their Discover Sources feature. So I think that's one of the most important ones. It reduces hallucinations, which is prevalent across all the large language models. It is efficient content summarization. It's a great place for marketers to pull that information base, that information source, whatever it may be, and bring it into a portal where you can then really pull apart the information, create content, summaries, it's study guides, briefing documents, etc. There's so much that you can do once you have that information in that portal. Now, of course, you can still do that in all the other large language models, but bringing it back to that factual base, knowing that it's only looking and reading at the content that you put in there. And it's so versatile. It has, you can put anything in there, and whether it pulls from YouTube, it pulls from websites, PDFs, audio, there's such a range of sources, data sources that you can pull into that you can't necessarily do with all the other models.
Love it. So what I'm hearing you say is that the big advantage that NotebookLM has is, first of all, it's part of the Google family of products. And for those that don't know, if you happen to have a workspace account, which means you pay for Google email, then this is really super secure. But even if you have a free Gmail account, you can also utilize this tool. And we're going to get into some of that a little bit, but I like the idea that the AI is essentially acting on only the information that you're providing it, and not necessarily bringing in any outside information at all, which increases the likelihood that you're getting something that is factually accurate. Because how many times have we asked AI models to do things for us and they just make it up? It happens all the time.
Oh my goodness.
Right?
It happened to me yesterday, and I was doing something in NotebookLM. I took it over to because I am a heavy ChatGPT user. I have been since the very beginning. And I really kind of wanted to use that space because it's ease. I know my way around there. I know the sort of prompting to use, but it just was not giving me the results. And I was really stern with ChatGPT. I was saying, what on earth are you talking about? This information is not in this document. Where are you getting this from? And you get oh, I'm so sorry. You're absolutely right. Let's have a look at that again. And I was like, oh, okay. So that is why for certain things, I much prefer NotebookLM, because at least I know if I'm wanting to reference a particular document, I'm going to get the factual information. There's going to be no hallucinations.
Okay, so we're going to explore some of the features of NotebookLM now. You already mentioned, I'll summarize a little bit about what you already mentioned, that you can attach PDFs. I believe you can paste in groups of text. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
YouTube, which is part of the Google ecosystem, so you can put links to YouTube videos. And you can also put audio files in there. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And then
that's
the
one of
Google
my favorite
Drive
features.
feature. Talk about the Google Drive integration real quick.
You can integrate with Google, so Google Docs and Google Slides. You can add those to your notebooks. Now, the other things that you can add, obviously, is PDF, Markdown, and we've already said audio. Now, I will say, when you are uploading your, say, a PDF, be very careful. I've tested it out that sometimes PDFs can have a lot of information on and be very, very complicated in respect of the sort of stuff that they have in, like images, etc. I recommend, if you're putting content into NotebookLM, if you have a PDF that has a lot of information, it might have images, it might have charts, etc., convert that to a Markdown document, which you can do inside ChatGPT, but convert it to a Markdown. It just makes it easier for NotebookLM to read it. It does accept PDF and it does accept Markdown.
Okay, explain what Markdown is for people that don't know what Markdown is. What does that mean?
It basically turns the document into a readable document of text. It keeps the formatting, but it's much more easier for the actual AI to read it. And it, as I said, it still retains the formatting, but it removes everything else, removes all the noise from the document. And I found that when I do that, in the testing that I have done, the results that I have found are much better when I upload a Markdown document as opposed to when I upload a document that might have tables in it with a lot of information, images, etc. Because the LMs, NotebookLM, I've found in my testings, doesn't read all the information, and sometimes it tends to skip information if I don't put it in a format that's actually better suited to the model.
Okay, cool. And when you do Markdown, it will extract the images out of it too. Is that what you're telling me? If there's images in the PDF?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What about images in NotebookLM? Can you put images in there, and can you put video files in there?
You cannot put images in there. You can put audio files in there, and you can put...
what about videos files like MP4?
No, you've got it's to YouTube. You add YouTube or a website or audio links.
Okay.
I've not had any success with actual videos.
Got it. Okay, cool. So Now that we know you can put a ton of different kinds of files in here as kind of your base library of information, let's talk about some of the features that you can do with that data once it's inside of NotebookLM.
Okay, so there's so many things you can do. So let's just quickly, just so your readers understand, especially for those that are not familiar with NotebookLM, when you go into the actual platform, you're going to have 3 portals in there. You're going to have a sources panel, which is where you upload all your source information, whether it's documents or PDFs or audio, whatever. Then you're going to have a chat panel, and that's where you're going to actually interact with whatever data source that you have uploaded. And then you have a studio panel, and that is the output. That is where you select the sort of content that you want. Now, what it is you get the ability to create interactive mind maps. You've got discover sources, multilingual audio overviews, interactive audio hosts, but you also have the ability to create overviews, like, what is it?
Briefing doc, is that what you're talking about?
I'm just having a mental break there. Yes, you can do a briefing doc. And
what is that? Describe what the briefing doc is.
Okay, so a briefing doc is when you basically you upload your source to NotebookLM, and then you select briefing doc, and it will give you an overview of the document that you have just uploaded. It will really break it all down for you. I'm just actually pulling it up here.
Yeah, and while you're doing that, I think it's more like of a summary, really, of the key points, right? Isn't that the idea?
It is. Bear with me for one moment.
Yep. And what's
okay? So
yep. Keep going.
So yeah, your briefing doc. It's a summary of everything that relates to the source that you have selected. Now, when you upload your source, you can upload a series of sources, and you can either talk to all of them. So, for example, say if I had 50 files uploaded into NotebookLM, I could tick all those files, and I could get a briefing doc on all that information.
Oh,
or I could select an individual file and only talk to that particular document. So it's great to basically get an overview of an entire content base or one specific item. What you can also do is a study guide. And once again, you can either select one document, 2 documents, or an entire library of documents that you have added to NotebookLM, and then start querying them and creating study guides to help you become educated in whatever it is that you are, whatever your source documents are. Then you can do FAQs, and of course you can do timeline documents as well.
Wow. Keep going.
Now, how I predominantly use NotebookLM, and as I said at the very beginning, I needed to find a tool to help me understand the whole AI ecosystem, to help me learn, to help me really kind of take in all the information. One use case that I use, which has been so incredibly helpful, is I am a huge podcast listener. I listen to AI Explored every Wednesday morning. It's my go-to, and then what I do is I'll generally be listening to my podcast when I'm out and about, when I'm driving in the car, when I'm walking. So what I'll do when I come home, I will upload that audio podcast into NotebookLM, and I have now curated a whole. I've got one notebook per podcast that I like. And as a new podcast is released, I add it to the notebook. And so what I can do then is when I get home, I can say, okay, create me a study guide on this particular podcast. Oh. And it allows me to actually educate myself. I can give myself tests, essentially. It will give me questions, and then it will have the answers at the very bottom. So I can create a study guide. I can create a briefing doc, which summarizes, obviously, all the key points of the podcast, or I could create an audio overview and listen to it again in a secondary podcast style. But the beauty of that is I can then interact with it and ask questions relating to that. So I can dig a little bit deeper. And so for me, it is an incredible tool to be able to keep on top of what is happening in the AI space. And, as I said, all my go-to podcasts. I've got your podcast in there. I've got Paul Rowitz's podcast in there, because that keeps me abreast of what's coming up, what's happening, what's current in the AI space. And of course, I use AI Explorer to really dig a bit deeper, because obviously your guests talk a little bit more about the use cases of these particular tools.
Okay, I got a bunch of questions. First of all, how are you getting the podcast in there? Are you using the YouTube link, or are you somehow you are using the YouTube link? Okay, because
I'm using the YouTube link. I just go to the YouTube link. I grab the main link, pop it into the sources, and it just pulls it's obviously pulling the transcript from the YouTube link. So if the YouTube video does not have a transcript, then it can't be pulled into Notebook.
Yeah, you'd have to figure out how to save it as a MP3 file or something like that.
Yes, you can. And if you have it as an audio file, you can upload it as an audio file. Yep. Or if you have a transcript, you can upload it as a transcript. So you have 3 options to upload a podcast: transcript, audio, or YouTube.
Okay, getting back to some of these features we talked about earlier. The study guide makes total sense, right? This is helping you kind of come up with questions to quiz yourself on the content that's in there. The briefing doc sounds like it's mostly a summarization of the key things that happened inside the content, right? But you kind of touched on this interactive mind map thing a little bit, and talk about that a little bit, please. And then I have a few more questions.
The interactive mind map is incredible. It's a new feature. There's a couple of new features that have recently come out. Interactive mind map's one of my favorites, because especially with when it comes to the podcasting episodes, there's so many topics that are spoken about, a different topic each week. And sometimes you talk about, say, let's use custom GPTs, for example. You might have talked about it in one episode here and another episode there, and 6 months later you talk about it. So with an interactive mind map, what you can do is you can click all your resources, absolutely all of them, and then it will break it down into subject matter. So it might be custom GPTs, but then there might be different, you might have taken that conversation in different angles. You might have been talking about creating, how to create a custom GPT, and it will break off and you click on that, and then it references back to the podcast that you spoke about, how to create a custom GPT. So I can basically type in there, give me more information. So it gives you a full mind map of all the content that is on the audio files, on the podcast. I've got all yours on there. So I can basically put a mind map against that, and it will break down every single topic, and then it will go even deeper and break down what you discussed in that topic. So from a educational point, that's wonderful for me. It's like, oh my goodness, in episode 90 something, they talked about whatever. I can pull that straight up. Or if it's your own podcast, you could use a mind map to actually see what content is missing. It will break it all down and identify what content is actually missing, and say, okay, well, we've spoken about all that. You could take a screenshot of that, put that into ChatGPT and say, this is the mind map of my podcast. Tell me, based on what we've spoken about, what else is there that we could possibly talk about? Who could we interview that would touch on these ideas, etc.? So you can really start using it in different ways.
Love it. Okay, when we were prepping, you said there was this thing called Discover Sources. Why don't you explain what that is?
Yeah, Discover Sources is a brand new feature of NotebookLM. What it enables you, once you have pulled all your own resources into NotebookLM or your data sources, that's all factual content. That's what you know. But perhaps you want to do some research and add some additional content into it that's out there on the web. You can then do what is called the discover sources, it's actually within your notebook. It's a little, when you're within your chat, you can actually, it's a little tab up the very top and it will say discover sources. If you tap that, you can actually ask it for more information on whatever it is that you want to know. And it will bring in, it will pull in 10 sources and it will have cited sources. And then you can select from those. It will give you the ability, they'll all be ticked. So you can have the ability to select which ones you want to pull into your notebook LM. So if it's come from a very reliable source that you know it's not hallucinating, you could confidently pull it into your notebook as an additional resource to the content that you have already got in there.
Love it. Okay, we mentioned earlier that NotebookLM is available to people with free Google accounts and with Workspace accounts. What's the difference, if any, features on the paid one versus the free one?
Okay, the paid one versus the free one. Now, there's a few features that we have in Notebook. Now, one of the really great features is a share feature. Now, if you have a paid account, you can share it within your team, all your content, and they then have access to the source documents as well as the chat feature. And so you can
It's like a knowledge base almost for your company.
It's a knowledge base. It's a complete knowledge base. You can either switch the source documents off so it's only chat, and that's the beauty of a paid feature. When you are using a paid account, you can just have chat feature only. So you can have all your knowledge base uploaded, and then they only have the ability, the people who you share your notebook with only has the ability to chat with the knowledge base. Whereas if you're on a free account, they can see the knowledge base and they can chat. You can still share outside of a free account, but they can see all your knowledge base and they can see, have the ability to chat, where you can really lock things down in a paid account. So that's one of the benefits of an actual paid account. And they also have you have greater abilities to, so for example, on a free account, you have, it is 50 documents that you can upload. And in a free notebook, you have 100 notes that you can create. You have 50 sources that you can upload, and you can have 50 chats. But on a paid account, you can create 500 notebooks. You have 300 source documents that you can add up, and you then have access to 500 chats. So that's a difference between the paid and the actual free accounts.
I love it. And I like the applications here because I can see, for example, in a customer support role, if you've got a bunch of customer service people that are interacting with customers, I could see how you could put information into a Notebook LM that maybe you don't want the customers to have access to, but you might want your support team to have access to. And it can kind of help you very quickly find what you're looking for, because that's a challenge sometimes, right? Just searching through a drive or something, right?
Yeah, you could have it. I mean, I guess it's sort of like a custom GPT that you can create a knowledge base in a chat GPT, custom GPT. But in this one, you do have the flexibility of locking it down to chat only or having them be able to access the resources. And if you have it as a resource within your team, it is so easy to just do a quick chat whilst you're on the phone call or whilst you're responding to an email to pull up the knowledge right there and then. It's accurate, it's your own knowledge, and it's so easily accessible.
Talk to me about how you're using this to curate news, because I thought that was a really fascinating application.
Well, that is using, you can curate news using that discover sources feature. So I can put in a prompt, please give me the most current AI news for the week of, or for the last week, or for the last 2 weeks. And it will then go out to the internet and do the search. And then you can pull that into your knowledge base and start talking on that. So that's a really good feature to be able to keep myself up to date. If I have missed anything, it would be great if they had an RSS feed that directs straight into Notebook. That would be fantastic. They don't have that feature, but I do believe we're just seeing the beginning of what this tool is going to be capable of doing. They have made so many changes since it first launched, and it's just becoming more and more of an amazing resource for marketers, creators, business operators to have as a real secure knowledge base for themselves.
Now, deep research is something that we've talked about on this show, which is a little more sophisticated, I think, than just what you were talking about. So You mentioned when we were prepping that there is a deep research inside this. Is that correct? Or is this not true?
No, it's not inside NotebookLM, but Google Gemini's deep research is fantastic. It rivals. I like ChatGPT's deep research, and I like Gemini's deep research. I use them depending on whatever it is that I am researching. But within the Google sphere, deep research is a Gemini product. So how it really complements NotebookLM really well. You can do a deep research, get all your information to the point where you're happy with it. You have turned it into a knowledge-based document. You can then pull that into NotebookLM and then really start dissecting it even more. So use Gemini Deep Research to gather all the information that you want, pull it into NotebookLM, and then start using it to create content, give briefing documents, email summaries, whatever the case you want to do with it. Once you get that deep research into NotebookLM, that is a solid piece of data for you to start using in whatever way that you wish.
Okay, you mentioned earlier that you can integrate Google Docs into NotebookLM. Is it smart enough to update? If you update a Google Doc, does it update into the library, or is that not how it works? Do you understand what I'm asking?
No, I think it just pulls in the Google. I don't use that feature. I haven't used that feature at all, to be quite honest. But my understanding is it doesn't update live. So if you pull the document in, it is not a live connection. I just believe that it pulls perhaps that will be as long as anything hasn't changed since the last time I tested it till now, let's just put it that way.
Got it.
It would pull the document in and it would use that resource. I don't think that there is a live connection, but I have no doubt that, the way that Google is innovating in this whole space, that is definitely going to be something that will be possible.
Okay, now I want to talk about the audio overviews feature. And before I do, some of you that have been a long time listener to the podcast might recall that I had two people, a male and a female, talking about my industry report that came out last year. And it turns out they weren't real people. They were actually, it was the audio overview feature, right? So kind of explain what you can do with that, because it's gotten a little more sophisticated, obviously.
Oh my goodness, audio overviews are insane. So using it in the context of how I use NotebookLM with the podcast, what I can do is I can create a secondary audio podcast based on, what podcast I'm listening to. So I can then go in and select, say, your latest episode of AI Explored Mike, and then I can then have two people talking about basically a podcast style conversation, talking about all the details of your podcast. What it does, it pulls apart all the really key topical information, and then they have a conversation like you and I are having now, the benefits of it, how amazing it is, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. They sound like two actual real people. It is just mind-blowing. I don't know how they do it, but it is incredible. But one of the features that I love with audio overviews is the ability to, when you are doing it on your laptop or on your desktop, you can interject and you can ask the AI or the two people that are in the interview, you can stop them and say, okay, wait, you mentioned this, but what about this? Can it do that? And it will change its whole trajectory of the conversation. It will then focus on what it is that you are asking. And as long as it is covered in the original source content, then it will be able to talk to that particular thing. You can download your audio overviews. So what you could do is create an audio overview of a podcast, or of a series of podcasts, so it condenses all of them together, and then you could listen to that while you're driving into work. You can't obviously do the interaction in that way. If you do decide to have an interactive conversation with your audio overview, it will not download that conversation. It will only download the original audio overview created. But whilst you are at your desk and talking to it, you can have an interactive conversation. It just doesn't record that element. It only records the actual one that it generated. And what blows my mind is that when you're listening to it, you can, as I said, you can have this interactive conversation, but then it switches back to the regular one as though it never happened, and you download that and it's all back to normal. So the technology is absolutely mind-blowing. And it's such a great way to learn. If you are able to sit and have a conversation with an audio overview and really break it down into terms that you can understand, that makes it so much easier to take the content in. And what I love about NotebookLM is you can do it in various ways. You can do it in audio. You can do it in written with briefing docs. There's many different ways that will help you understand the content that you've got up there, depending on how you prefer to learn. Some people are audio, some people like to read, some people like to write, and that enables you to do that.
Awesome. Okay, just before we began today's podcast interview, you said you had an interesting application that you wanted to share about people going to meetings. So if you could share a little bit of that, that would be amazing.
Yeah, so one of the applications is one of my clients is in the tourism industry. As I mentioned at the very beginning, that was where I started. I was an international marketing manager for a tourism organization, and I used to go to these massive trade shows, or I'd travel around the world meeting people. Now, here in Australia, just this week that we're in, there was a big trade show called Tourism, the ATE, Australian Tourism Exchange. And it's basically where the Northern Hemisphere comes to the Southern Hemisphere. All the tourism operators, agents, airlines meet all the tourism operators here in Australia. And it is speed dating for the tourism industry, where you're meeting up to 100 meetings in the course of 3 days. And you've got like 8-minute meetings with all these people. And my client come to me and said, I've got all these meetings. What's the best way to actually handle this? And I said, well, there's a really great tool that you could use called NotebookLM. If you record the audio on your iPhone in Notes, you can download the audio, because they didn't have any other recording devices at the time. So I went to something that was free, something that they already had, and that was easy for them to use. And I think that's important with any of the tools that we use. It has to be easy to use. And if you've already got it in your toolbox, why not use it? So I said, you've got an iPhone, you've got Notes, record your meetings on there, download the audio. We can then put it into NotebookLM. We can get a full transcription of each meeting. So the steps were, they downloaded the audio. We put it into NotebookLM. I got them to transcribe the meeting notes. Then from the transcription, we were able to create... By the way,
what did the transcription? Was that part of NotebookLM, or was that a third-party tool?
No, that was done in NotebookLM.
Okay.
So I put the audio into NotebookLM. It transcribed the entire meetings, all of the audios for the meetings. I segmented into day 1, day 2, day 3, all the meetings on those days. And then I could either select the individual meeting or select all the meetings. And I said, basically, give me a transcription of all of these meetings. It did that with ease. And then I was able to then create meeting notes from that transcription. Mm-hmm. And I then gave it a very detailed task prompt of what I wanted those meeting notes to contain. So once I then got the actual meeting notes, I was then able to take those. I then turned that meeting note into a source document, into an actual, I put it back into the source documents on NotebookLM, because the beauty of NotebookLM is when you create a note, you can then turn that into a source document and move it back over with all your original documents. So now I have a source document that has the transcription for all the meetings. So I could then go to NotebookLM and say, next step is obviously create the meeting notes. Next step is now draft me an email so I can do my follow-up to all the meetings. Make sure it has all the key information, key points that we discussed, make sure it includes any action items that we need to follow up, the sort of content that they want. Basically, it gave a really condensed overview of what that meeting was, what the outcomes were, and what we had to do from there. And once I had that draft email, then I could then go to the client and says, here is your draft email, go through, make sure you're happy with this, change anything that is necessary, and then we can send it off.
This is kind of crazy. I mean, it seems like there's kind of almost whatever you can imagine can kind of be done with this, right? The key, just to summarize some of what I'm hearing you say, the key is to have the right information inside of the notebook. And each notebook obviously can have, as you mentioned, audio files, or it can have YouTube links, or it can have PDFs or documents. So I'm sure as people are listening to this, there's a million potential applications that could be done with this. Is there anything else that pops into your mind that's an interesting way that you're using this that we have not already addressed?
Well, I think we kind of spoke about it when it comes to Teams. I think it is a great resource for Teams, and purely because it is a secure knowledge base. Now, I'll give you an example. I have one of my peers and fellow AI enthusiasts, we meet on a weekly basis for a mastermind, and we were talking about NotebookLM, and she was explaining to me how her team uses it. Now, she is the head of tech at Kerwin-Rae. Now, I'm not too sure if any of your American viewers will know who Kerwin-Rae is. Many of our Australian viewers will, but he's basically Australia's version of Gary Vee. Very sadly, we lost Kerwin last year. He passed away, but his legacy lives on with the hundreds and with the thousands of hours of training that they had with their recorded Elite 3-day masterminds that they had over the past 10 years. So they identified that they had all this information there. How do they get this information out and turn it into a resource that they could use? Because I'm sure that there's a lot of people out there that have video recordings, that have YouTube channels, that have data over the years that is just sitting somewhere that is not easily accessible. Well, NotebookLM fixed it for them because and it's a great real world example of how they're using it, because as I said, they've got over 10 years of recorded Elite 3-day events, and they're pulling it out of the archives, and from there they're actually, they use the transcription. They put the transcription into LM. As I said, we're talking thousands of hours of content. They pull it all into NotebookLM, and now they're able to, and especially with the mind mapping feature, they're now able to see everything that they have done. They have easy access to all the content they have ever created, and then their team can look at it, and then they can start creating new content based on what they already have. And they said it has been an absolute game changer for their team to be able to have access to this content.
Lisa, this has been a game changer for a lot of people who are listening. I'm sure there's people that have pulled over on the side of the road and are taking notes, or sending this to some of their colleagues saying, you've got to listen to what Lisa has to say. This has been super helpful. Now, if people want to connect with you on the socials, where do you want to send them? And if they want to learn more about your business, where should they go?
Okay, so I am across all the socials, Lisa Monks. If you just Google Lisa Monks or Chipmunk Media, you'll find me on Facebook, on Instagram. Predominantly on LinkedIn is probably the best place for me to connect. That's where I generally talk about all AI related stuff. My website is lisamonks.com. And Mike, I'm actually have got a resource for your listeners. So if they go to lisamonks.com/SME, it's going to be pretty much a full guide of how to use NotebookLM. And I'm referencing many different use cases. We've only touched on a few here today, but I'm referencing many use cases that they can go and look at and learn and see how they can integrate this tool into their business systems.
Awesome. That's lisamonks.com/SME. Lisa, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure, Mike. It's been an absolute honor. Thank you so much.